And now, three guys that aren't astronauts, but after the apocalypse, they'll tell girls they were. In this episode, we're joined by author Glen Tate of the super popular 299 Days book series. He's going to get the matches while we get the marshmallows to discuss the burning down of the United States. Afterward, we feel very guilty about it. This is episode 135 of In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcasts. We're your hosts, Aaron
and Jason.
And you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound.
Just hit that record button and let's knock this thing out of the park.
Got it. So Glenn, welcome back, man.
Well, thanks for having me. I had such a good time last time. I think it was the best interview I've ever done. It was by far the funniest, and because you guys are funny. So I'm excited for good stuff. Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Before we dive in today, support the ITRH mission by becoming a member of the Roving Horde Armada. You'll be keeping the show safe and sound. Visit itrh.net today to help us keep the lights on. Now, back to Glenn. So I think today we're going to kind of run the gamut of topics, it sounds like. I think I know one of the things that we wanted to revisit from the last time was the idea of persuading others, especially those around you, to prepare. And maybe we can even get into some of your predictions coming frighteningly close to being true here.
Yeah, no, two great topics. Let's go.
To come back again to stuff that really does speak to your books, lots of stuff going on in the economy right now. We've got Greece, and it looks like Germany broke down and is going to bail them out again. And, we do have the thing that, aside from Texas asking for their gold back, Texas is trying to get together some kind of gold exchange, which I don't pretend to be an expert on what's going on with that. We have the stuff going on with the Chinese stock market. So what's your take on what's going on? We'll start there. What's your take on what's going on with the Chinese stock market?
Boy, crony capitalism that they have there. The other word, the technical political science word, would be fascism, because that's what it is. And everyone thinks fascism means people with little mustaches, and no, that's not true. It's corporations and government getting together and the crony stuff and the use of authoritarian force. I mean, it describes China to a T. So that's your starting point. That's your baseline of what's going on there. And they all got greedy. I mean, in a lot of ways, communist / fascist political leaderships are like the mob, especially true of North Korea, by the way. And they act like a mafia organization more than the government, although there's a lot of overlap. So, they got greedy, and the families, there are families in China, and these are all generalizations I'm giving out, but the families got greedy and they kept investing in their stock market. They kept making money. It was a big bubble. I mean, they've lost, I think, 30% of the stock market value. By the way, 90% of the Chinese stock market is not trading and will not be trading for, in some cases, up to 6 months. That is a crash that was never allowed to actually land. I mean, that's like a crashing airplane that somehow is suspended 6 feet above the ground, and the airplane's still on fire, but it didn't technically hit the ground. So this is a huge event. By the way, you're not hearing much about it. It's not like Chinese stock prices fell 50%. You'd hear about that. But anyway, back to the 30% fall in a couple months. That's still at prices that are higher than they were, at the close of 2014. So that's just this enormous bubble. I attribute to greed. In China, you don't have regular people investing money. To the Chinese credit, the average member of the population is not greedy, buying and selling real estate and buying and selling stocks and thinking they can get rich, kind of like we did, in the mid-2000s here. Inevitably, something happens, stock prices start falling. I think this might be figurative, but it might also be literal. The Chinese government putting guns up to the heads of investors saying you will not sell. And they're going after short sellers now and like rounding them up and imprisoning them, kind of like Elizabeth Warren would do if she ever got elected. But no, they're doing that kind of stuff. So that I just attribute it to like a mob Ponzi get rich quick scheme gone awry. Now I'm sure there are all kinds of other factors involved. They built way too much stuff way too quickly. We don't have perfect information, for example, about how much money that their central bank created out of thin air. But that they did the same thing kind of on steroids that we've been doing, and created fake companies with fake amounts of money that were created by a central bank, and then they spent it, and all the things malinvestment 101. Classic example, probably studied for decades to come in economics classes, to the extent they study malinvestment instead of just studying how awesome Keynesian economics is. And so that's what's going on with that, and completely predictable. The question was when, and it happened. So there's that. The question is, what's the reaction going to be? Are they going to do anything about it, or are they going to do this sort of forced suspension of their stock market? That has ramifications. Ironically, and this always happens, and this pisses me off, that a bunch of money from around the world that can go somewhere, they flee something like the Chinese market or the Greek market or whatever, and they pour their money in the U.S. market, which is, quote, safe. And I say it pisses me off because here the U.S. economy, is running on fumes and is propped up with a myriad of artificialities. And what happens? We get all these trillions, billions, whatever it is, of dollars and yuan and yen and drachma. Okay, the drachma doesn't exist right now, but it will pretty soon in Greece. And we get all this money poured into our economy, and it's like, it's not fair. I know that sounds like a total whine, right? But
it's artificially basically raising our value, or the value of the dollar up, right? So we have
absolutely
artificially very valuable currency when in reality it's not worth anything.
Exactly. And luckily, we don't have anything to export from this country, so having a strong dollar doesn't mess us up. And I'm not being sarcastic. Luckily,
right.
We don't sell anything abroad. And so we're in this great position by just being the United States. And that'll end. There will be a safer place to put money. There's talk. I have no idea if this is true. This is speculation warning. The Chinese might have a gold-backed or partially gold-backed currency. There's all this talk about October. There are apparently signs up, billboards and things like that in China. I haven't been to China. I don't read Chinese, so I don't know this to be true. They're going to roll one out. And so if there's some huge game changer like that, then all the money exits the now risky United States and goes somewhere else. It could go to the euro. Don't think that'll happen. It could go to who knows what, special drawing rights from the IMF that are, and the yuan is one of the currencies. There's a million places. But when that happens, and it will happen, because as I say, this economy in the United States is running on fumes, and there's no rational reason to buy U.S. Treasury bonds. Right. You'll never get paid.
Yeah.
It makes no sense at all. And so once the artificial demand for U.S. dollars and the U.S. stock market and all other stuff goes away and reality is allowed to set back in, oh my goodness, we're going to see a flight of capital from this country. We're going to see the value of the dollar just go way down, and that's game day.
Yep. I completely agree. What are your views on the BRICS bank thing that China and Russia and getting together to set up?
Well, I think that's the alternative to the U.S. dollar being the world reserve currency. I think it is enormously troubling. I don't know if they pull it off, because I don't know enough about how much they fight against each other and hate each other. And so, on the surface, it might look like, oh yeah, they're all going to get together, and maybe they don't. But if they do get together, and I suspect they will, because there's a ton of money to be made, which of course is what drives just about everything in this world. They do get together, and they have gold-backed, partially gold-backed, oil-backed, or they just have a currency that for whatever reason the rest of the world believes in, then the dollar's done for.
Yep.
And gas is $12 a gallon, and then a week later it's $20 a gallon, because of those dollars that you're paying for it don't mean anything. What is Saudi Arabia, which by the way, has a king die a couple months ago, and if I recall, we still have not normalized diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia.
You are
correct.
Cut
that off.
Yep, you are correct.
Which is so stunning. If you would have said that in the 80s or 90s, people would have thought you were on drugs. And so Saudi Arabia, and the other Gulf countries, buy and sell oil in U.S. dollars.
Mm-hmm.
What if they go, you know what, we're done trading with the great Satan, or they have an insurrection in their country, or the new guy that takes over, the new prince or whatever, is a hardcore Wahhabist and wants to stick it to the great Satan and says, we're going to start taking yuan for oil or rubles or whatever, or gold,
right?
Which could happen, which is what I would do if I were a Saudi prince, besides having like 50 hot wives. Anyway, so you could totally crash the dollar. It's going to happen, and it's probably going to be the BRICS. It may not just be as simple as it being China only.
I think it's going to be a conglomerate of basically all the people that are tired of RBS.
Well, and I think that speaks to going back to whether or not they can pull it off. You know, you touched on an interesting point a few minutes ago, that they do hate each other, but what I think a lot of people forget is their hatred for us is a lot stronger than their hatred for each other. And that is the big commonality all of these guys have. Mm-hmm. And so I think in a lot of ways, I mean, we're watching over there, and with all of that, if they can keep themselves from completely imploding, is a long drawn out chess game that we've been ignoring, where the whole setup was for everybody to give a big screw you to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. It's what always happens to empires that are in their last few days. Look at how the world was all for Britain 100 years ago, 120 years ago, and Britain, pound sterling, ran everything. And all of a sudden, everybody turned on. There was this new upstart industrial power called the United States back then that took over. And it's like mob succession sort of stuff. Yeah, I'm with you. Bam, right in the head, that kind of thing. And that's how these things go. And we all know there's no way the U.S. dollar is sustainable in its current form. Absolutely, mathematically, no way. It should have fallen earlier. And so there'll be something to take it over, because there needs to be a way of conducting global commerce, especially since everything is so globalized. And, you know, you need a part for this phone I'm talking on right now, and it needs to come from China, and it's probably made in Vietnam, and Indian engineers and all these other things. So we're all tied together. So there needs to be a way of trading. And when it's not the U.S. dollar, this country, I mean, I can't even, and I'm a political person. I think politically, it's innately, I understand politics, and I'm looking around at all these people walking around in this parking lot right now. How do they possibly even grasp, number one, what's going on now, but number two, when it happens and gas is $20 a gallon 2 weeks after some big announcement that the Chinese or the BRICS countries have a gold-backed currency, you know, they're just going to lose their freaking minds. Absolutely go insane. And that is why I prep. And the main thing is deranged sheeple running around hungry and scared. I'm not concerned that Delta Force is going to knock my door down because I'm a gigantic threat to the United States government.
Right.
I don't think that at all. I don't think I'm that important, to be quite honest. So that's not what I'm worried about. It's all the sheeple ramifications.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'd say that definitely is probably the biggest danger to any of us is really not so much what anyone thinks is going to happen with Jade Helm or Delta Force knocking on their door or anything like that, but it's really the scared, hungry masses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the big problem. And you know what's kind of reassuring about that? I mean, I don't want people to be scared and hungry, but what's reassuring about it is I'm way better prepared to deal with hungry sheeple than I am Delta Force, because Delta Force shows up and I'm so dead so quick, it's not even funny.
Yeah.
And, you know, I actually have a chance against, you know, crazed office workers who have never worked out and are like, you know, completely addicted to Doritos and playing video games and watching ESPN and eating chicken wings. If that's my opponent, I like my odds.
Yeah. Well, but they play Modern Warfare an awful lot.
Oh, okay.
That just means that they will have no earthly idea what cover is, and we'll be able to pick them off before they even get close enough.
Wait, I don't get a regeneration life? Going back to sheeple and stuff, I mean, even that the sheeple, that there's that false sense of, you know, what their real skill level is, and going back to the reality of it, I think that is one of the interesting things. The more you train, the more you realize you're not going to go up against somebody that does that professionally, right. Well, and not live.
Yeah, absolutely. I have the really, I don't know, cool honor of living near Joint Base Lewis McChord, home of 1st Special Forces Group, 2nd Ranger Battalion, and some other interesting folks. And a lot of the ranges, the civilian ranges where I live and I go shoot, those guys are out either doing their own recreational shooting, or sometimes they have classes, civilian off-base classes. And I get to watch those guys. Holy crap, what a mismatch it would be. They're really good.
Yeah. It's like watching tactical ballet.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And I sit there, they're good. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So I think, and going on to, since we were getting people so wound up about China, what's your take on what happened recently with the stock market and American Airlines and all of that? You think it's coincidence, or you think there really is something to that, and we'll never hear the real story of what happened?
Oh,
just to take out and play with our tinfoil hats for a few minutes.
Yeah. Oh, I don't think it's tinfoil hat at all. The tweet that apparently is authentic, I don't really know, but it seems to be. The Hill reported this, and that's a pretty authentic source. The tweet from Anonymous, the hacker group, 12 hours before, saying, and I paraphrase, tomorrow might be a bad day for Wall Street. Let's hope so. So I didn't know that had come out. By the way, InfoWars, we can rip on InfoWars or not. I mean, some of their stuff's accurate. They actually broke that story. Good on them, by the way. So that was good journalism. Then the Hill picked it up. But anyway, back to as the crisis was unfolding, it started, and I didn't want to overreact. Again, the credibility thing. And I had, with this group text with my team, I'm kind of the intel guy. I'm the one who knows what's going on and what's a problem and what's not. One of the roles I fulfill. And because they're all really good gunfighters and they're better than me. They're all 20 years younger than me, so I'll give myself a break on that. But so I didn't want to be the boy who cries wolf and overdo it. So as it's going, I'm like, okay, there's an outage, blah, 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 all these things. Could be a technical thing. Odds are it's a technical thing. I see United Airlines go down. I describe that to my guys as that's the second plane hitting the second tower. I mean, that to me, that was a pretty significant sign. The Wall Street Journal happened to be down, which would make sense if you were trying to prevent, the selling of stocks. Then the Anonymous thing comes out, and it's pretty obvious to me that it was a hack. By the way, I just assumed that most stock trading went on the New York Stock Exchange. It's actually not the majority of stocks that are traded anymore. It used to be.
Yeah, it's only 10%, which, I mean, we all became, geologists that day. And so suddenly it was like the news is, I was watching, I was like, wow, that's only 10%. So really it's just more of a figurehead now, which is a perfect target for terrorists, whether hacker terrorists or Islamic terrorists or, beaver terrorists. I don't know, whatever. It is, that's what terrorists always go after, symbols.
The symbol, yeah. And they don't go after NASDAQ because most people don't know what that is. So when I saw that, it was pretty clear to me that it was a hack. I mean, of course, it was so funny. Who was I talking to? One of my coworkers. I don't let him onto this stuff, but I was one of the IT guys here, and I said, yeah, there's a tweet apparently from Anonymous taking credit for it. This guy, this IT security professional, actually said to me, well, no, the stock exchange said it was a technical glitch. They've ruled out cyber attack. And I looked at him like, oh, okay, well, then I guess that's established. Of course. Like a stock exchange is going to say, oh, we were totally hacked. You know what you need to not do is invest money in our stock exchange because some guy will probably steal it. Are you kidding me? Target, after that breach a year and a half ago, is still suffering sales ramifications because people don't want their money stolen by using their product. Are you kidding me? A stock market admitting it was a hack? Forget the whole political side of it where the government would never allow that admission to be made because it would lead to the natural question, why are we spending so much money on cybersecurity that seems to not be working? Anyway, they'll never admit it. And if I'm not with you guys, but with the outside world, if I'm a tinfoil hat wacko that says, apparently this was a hack, I'm okay with that. Now, I mentioned it stops people from selling stocks, which could be another reason to do this. I think the most direct explanation, the one there's most evidence for, I am a lawyer, I think of things like evidence and burdens of proof and all that other stuff. The most evidence by far is Anonymous and that tweet. Another thing that could be going on, somebody didn't want people to sell a bunch of stock. This New York Stock Exchange hack happens literally instantaneously, same point in time, with the Chinese market dropping and then freezing up.
Yeah.
It was almost like somebody didn't want people to sell their American stocks. Obviously, American stocks and Chinese stocks are so interrelated, and so there's a real connection between the two. So it could have been anonymous. It could have been people wanting to stop selling. I don't think anonymous goes out and like works for people. I don't think anarchists are really good employees, so I don't think that's an issue. But anonymous was helping out people who didn't want Americans to sell stock, and it'd be mutual funds basically selling stock. So I find that to be another plot flavor enhancer, if you will. It was not innocent. There's no way. And again, I went into this assuming it was a technical glitch until I got evidence to prove otherwise. I got evidence to prove otherwise. So I think it was a hack, and there'll be more of them. I mean, New York Stock Exchange, I mean, that's very interesting and dramatic and symbolic, and it's good terrorism/politics. I get all that. You know, the electrical grid, that's the hack that I worry about. Somehow taking down all or part of the internet, which I don't really think is possible. I'm no expert on this, but I mean, it's so decentralized, it may not be possible. But the power grid, here's the thing, and here's a great thing to tell people who are skeptical about prepping. It's all provable. You can Google this stuff. The Department of Homeland Security agency head, whatever director, I think it was she at the time, anyways, who annoys me. But anyway, she's testifying in an open session of the United States House of Representatives. Okay, this is beyond on the record. This is like, you know, you can't get any more legitimate than this source. And she said, we know that the Russians and perhaps the Chinese have placed malware in the software that runs the power grid in this country, and all it needs to do is be turned on, the malware, that is. And this has happened about a year and a half ago. She was saying that the placement of the malware, and this was about a year ago that this was said, Napolitano, it was either her or that current guy, Jay, whatever his name is. Anyway, now if this is all verifiable, if this is the United States government admitting in the open that there is bad stuff in the electric grid software that could shut down the electrical grid, if that isn't a reason to do some minimal prepping, if that isn't verifiable, this is not bark at the moon crazy stuff, I don't know what is. And I just can't believe that was a one-day news story. Actually, I can believe it was a one-day news story, but
because there's
sad that
it is really sad, and it just goes to show how far most people's heads are stuck in the sand. And there's actually been several pretty big articles out lately that just kind of got buried that basically said, yeah, okay, we've talked to Homeland Security, we've talked to everybody, and the grid is on a constant increasing basis being attacked. And we're pretty sure it's China and Russia. Yep.
You know what? This will be interesting. After this collapse, and when we get through it and we get to collect our thoughts and we can have that historical perspective and look back, way back at, 2015, right? Mm-hmm. I just wonder what the historical narrative will be about why people had their head in the sands. We all know that, like I said, it's summertime. Let's talk about baseball and let's go to barbecues. I mean, all that stuff. But I really wonder what people in the future will look back and have as the explanation for why people were such idiots in present day America. I'm curious as can be. And yes, I'm a nerd. Yes, I think about these things all day long. There's something wrong with me.
I think it's like hypnotism with social media and all the celebrity bullshit. I mean, literally, a majority of the younger population is so entranced. They just don't want to deal with all the hard stuff.
Yeah, they'd rather focus on, well, I guess we're past Kim Kardashian's butt, and we're now on Bruce Jenner's butt, which is a little weird. I mean, that kind of goes along with me rubbing on my hairy arms on Jason right now. So,
Easy.
We're having to share the microphone today, so not that people think, Jason and I are taking advantage of the new gay marriage laws. So, yeah. So to scoot back into economy and, of course, into the heart of your book, or at least the storyline is that it's a fast collapse as opposed to something more Romanesque, where it's this very kind of slow winding, and then eventually one day, it just gets to the point where it's just a total collapse. I guess, why do you feel that it's going to be more sudden and more in our time than something that is this kind of slow, meandering, going out with a whimper rather than a bang scenario?
That's a great question. I can't believe this. I think you're the first guy to ever ask me that question, and it's so fundamental and good. The answer is that the American population is so woefully unprepared for any inconvenience, let alone disruption of any kind. And so a teeny little thing, EBT cards going down for a while, which a lot of people think, including me, is the thing that kind of sparks the overt violence. You turn on the TV and there's a bunch of fires in your town and you hear sirens kind of thing. I mean, but is that we're so fragile. That's the word I was looking for. Americans are so fragile that a little thing becomes a huge thing. And that's why it's not like other countries. I mean, you mentioned Rome, obviously, back then, they were somewhat self-sufficient. I mean, there's no electricity, for example. Even the Russian collapse, and I look a lot at the Russian collapse of the early 90s, and there was a second one in the mid 90s, and I try to glean as much information as possible out of that. The Russians, in their collapses, they did pretty well because they weren't used to all kinds of fancy stuff, and they really fared better. We've all talked about, I think, and I've heard it on your show, in the Depression, people fared better. We had most people living on farms. Everyone knew how to can. Everyone hunted. Everybody, the charitable, civic morality, for lack of a better set of terms, existed, and people in general helped each other and took care of each other. So societies can weather hiccups better or worse, and we absolutely cannot. So that's why I think it's going to be relatively quick. And the other thing is we've had just years and years of quantitative easement and all these other things that have built up the mountain of badness. And I'll be the first to say it's entirely possible. It's a slow rollout. Here's a classic example, and that's what happened in the Chinese stock market this week. Mr. The end of the world is going to happen today kind of guy, probably you guys too, would have assumed, Chinese stock market will go down 40% in one day. Well, no, there were stops in place. They prevented trading. So something that is going to crash, and kind of did crash in a lot of ways, didn't actually hit the ground. Like I was talking about that burning airplane suspended 6 feet over the ground. So maybe things are slower because the bad guys have all this ability to control events, not the entire ability to control events, but they can control impacts and they can lessen things and all of that. So maybe that happens. But again, it's that fragility of American society and economy and all of that stuff that makes it all of a sudden, Walmarts are getting trashed and there's fires everywhere. And once that starts, there's no putting that genie back in the bottle, because after 72 hours or so, based on the discussions I've had with cops, they're going home, and then the free for all starts. So That's why I think that happens.
That is exactly my biggest fear. That's what I prep for.
I prep for zombies.
You know what? We were talking about persuading people and why are the sheeple still awake or still asleep. I think that it's so easy to laugh at zombies. I think that's had a lot to do with it. It's that easy characterization. Oh, you're afraid of zombies. But anyway, that's the whole
Yeah.
thing. I know you aren't serious, but I mean, I think that the prevalence of zombie movies and shows, and Hornady, did their thing where they did, zombie green tip, whatever, lime green tips, anti-zombie ammunition and stuff. That got a lot of play on the news, and it's easy to chuckle at. But no, zombies is a metaphor for the sheeple that are running around hungry and crazed and off their meds. Huge problem, off their meds. If you want to use it as a metaphor, it's absolutely true.
Yeah. I think I actually wrote a pretty extensive article on it a long time ago when zombies were first really becoming popular. And I think one of the big reasons I think zombies were becoming popular is because they moved the zombie genre out of a horror genre into more of a parable. There was always a lesson of survival. The zombie TV shows and movies we have now and books are stories about survival. They're not just gore shows. So they have a lot more substance to them now. But the way I positioned it was it's easier for people to get their heads around and get excited about and even get into prep because of the survival genre of zombie fiction now than it is to come out and say a collapse or something else. Because in one, it's easier to digest on our own. It's not as scary. You can set it down and it's not real anymore. As opposed to I'm prepping for the technological singularity where, Skynet comes online and kills us all. Well, to most people, that sounds like crazy talk. And, even with most sheeple, if they were to say that to themselves, I think they would immediately say, oh, that's crazy talk. I can't get into it. As opposed to, I'm just role playing and having fun with the whole zombie thing.
Yeah, you just gave me an epiphany. I'm changing my mind about the zombie thing. And I'll say that zombie genre is a double-edged sword. On the plus side, it has opened up people's minds about prepping in a sense. For example, in an episode of Walking Dead, I don't watch the show. I'd love to. I don't have time, but maybe there's like a thing about water treatment. And so for the first time ever, people are like, wow, water purification. That might be something I need to think about. So there's the positive, and the negative is the whole caricature part of it. So maybe it's a little more balanced than I was thinking 35 seconds ago before you started talking.
Well, I think it's pros and cons. And this goes back to most of us in the prepper community got pretty upset about the prepper reality TV shows and the way preppers were being portrayed in these reality TV shows. And something really interesting happened. We had a bunch of people that showed up on our forum, and we started getting emails from people that actually said that even though the shows were ridiculous and they made us all look like loons, it did actually cause a number of people to stop and ask themselves, hey, actually, if that really did happen, what would I do? And actually got them into prep, which really just shocked the crap out of me.
Wow, that is cool. That is really cool. Because the thing you need to obviously be successful at prepping, and I'm going to say it's 90% of it, is understanding that all this stuff could happen. And once you've got that down, everything else is a detail. How to purify water is a detail. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you can go online and you can learn and you can buy stuff and you can store stuff. I mean, it's doable. It's that huge hurdle of people thinking they need to do this. It's kind of like exercising. I mean, who's going to exercise if you don't think you need to? I mean, it's not fun.
Yeah. It depends on the exercise, right?
Yeah, that's true. But you gotta answer the question, why do I need to do this? And then everything flows from there. So that's good. I didn't realize that about doomsday preppers and stuff actually having a positive effect on society. I watched 8 minutes of that show one time. I was doing some business travel. I'm in a hotel.
Yeah.
I turned it on and I said, oh my God, these people are lunatics. And all my friends think I'm this insane. All my friends that know I prep, which is a pretty small group, they've got to think that I am this freaking crazy. And I don't like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was most of our reaction to it is this is how my friends and family are going to see me. And to some degree, that is true. I mean, most of my friends that aren't preppers, for the most part, think I'm completely nuts. But to be fair, they always thought I was nuts. And Jason, we've always known he was nuts. So that's why I roll with him. But yeah, I mean, it did have some positive effect and it did wake some people up. And it was so counterintuitive. But hey, whatever will wake people up, without, causing serious bodily injury, I would hope. One thing, and this is going off on another kind of tangent.
Down a rabbit hole?
Down a rabbit hole without necessarily a clean segue. But, and I think we were kind of touching on it a little bit before we really started recording. And I think that's the idea that I think a lot of us kind of sit around in some, I don't want to say childish way, but just kind of going, God, will we just get on with it already? Mm. And or even perhaps the slightly more destructive mindset of some political decision comes out or some fool says something dumb about, well, prepping's a waste of time or something. And you think, I'm just ready to see all of this burn. And it'll be so much better after all of this just burns, which isn't really an accurate thought process. But how do you, because I'll admit, I think that from time to time, and I know a lot of people do. How do you wrestle with that?
Oh boy, there's been an evolution. There's a chapter in book 1, it might be book 2, but I stole the name of the chapter from Tom Petty, and the name of the chapter is "The Waiting is the Hardest Part." And it's about me, well, my character, Grant Mattson, but it's really me, sitting there as things are unfolding. And we're having sort of riots, not full-on riots, but we're having all kinds of mass political protests and things like that. going on. So that's what stage it's at, and saying, geez, let's get this on. I mean, it was a combination of let's get this on. But the other half of it was, why aren't people seeing this? There were still people going to work, even though, and this takes place in the state capital of Olympia, Washington. So they're going to work right where the protests are. It's not like they work on some small farm in Kansas and there's some big political protest in Washington, D.C. So anyway, how can people not see this? So how do I wrestle with it? At first, I felt really guilty about even having that thought, and I suppressed it in my mind. I was like, well, whatever, happens, I just don't want it to happen. And then I started wearing down. I couldn't sustain that. And of course, I don't want stuff to happen. And that's true. I don't want stuff to happen, because who is the big winner in all of this if nothing bad happens? It's those of us that had peace of mind during all these very turbulent times. So I don't want it to happen, but now I sit there and I cannot deny that this needs to get going. I don't want it to get going, but I mean, it feels we're midstream. We're already in the beginning of this thing, so it's not as if there's a choice to have it start or not. I mean, the pace of events is quickening. Everyone I talk to, I mean, especially a week like this, heck, the week before, and a week like this, and, goodness only knows what's going to happen in another couple weeks or couple months. And so, yeah, I do struggle with it, but I do. The longer it goes on the way things are, the longer we print money, the longer we prop up the stock market, the longer we have all the goofy things, the artificialities, the malinvestment, the worse it's going to be. It's like pulling that Band-Aid off. And the more and more people, for example, who are baby boomers, who are going to be dependent on government medical insurance, I guess everyone already is, it's been forced upon us. All these kinds of things I look at, and I want to stop the decay now so that there's less decay and it's easier to rebuild. That's my whole thing. Easier to rebuild. That's not a great answer, but I don't know that I have one.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, I think that speaks to it really, is that I think we all wrestle with that. Like we don't want to see people hurt. We don't want the mass casualties. We don't want the starvation. We don't, whatever the scenario is that plays out in the individual prepper's head. But at the same time, there's that anxiousness, and there is that sort of that sort of payback, almost desire, where you're just like, you know what, you guys made this mess. Y'all came in here and crapped in the living room and crapped in the living room again, and well, now the whole place is stunk up. So I just kind of want to see the whole thing burn. And I think that's hard because, like you were saying, I mean, there's a lot of desire for that to happen, but at the same time, there's a lot of guilt with the thought of wanting that to happen.
And I think a lot of us in the prepping community, the people I've run into that I know well enough to know their personality, we all have a sense of justice. And take the Dorito eating, guy living off parents or living off of welfare or whatever it is. And there are a lot of people, 96 million people in this country not in the workforce out of 318 million. Oh, but the unemployment rate's only 5.5%. Explain me how that happens.
Yeah.
But those Dorito-eating, idiot, mindless, materialistic, shallow, metaphorically zombies, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a sense of justice. I mean, I work hard. You guys work hard. The government takes an enormous amount of money from me. And I look at these guys, and yeah, I get a little pissed. Those Doritos they're eating, I freaking paid for. Mm-hmm. I paid for those things. And here's the other thing. That guy is not, going to have a happy life sponging off of me. I mean, it's dependence to get votes and all that other stuff. And it's not good for that guy either. Now, I don't want to kill that guy. I seriously don't. But when all the stuff falls down and he's got no Doritos and he goes to Walmart with the other looters to go get the Doritos, and there either are none left or there's, a bunch of fights breaking out and he gets hurt in a fight or something like that. It's like a little bit of a sense of justice. Now, here's the key thing, and I really want people to hear what I'm saying. I'm not going out of my way to directly do anything to mess that guy up for a variety of reasons. Number one, my conscience. But turning to a sense of justice, that guy being really, really hungry or getting beat up or whatever, I'm kind of shrugging at this point because it was so obvious what the outcome of lifestyle was going to be. And it's not my fault. In fact, you got to have that lifestyle, Mr. Doritos eating punk, against my will. A bunch of my money was taken from me against my will so that you could have this comfortable life, and every 4 years you go out and you vote. And we're done. This is over.
Yeah.
It's not just for this to keep going on, and it's getting worse, and that's bad. So I'm like the grown-up, and a lot of you guys are, and preppers in general. We're like the grown-ups who say, we're not going to keep, giving this kid money, and he's going to keep, like, wrecking the nice cars that we buy him. We're not going to keep doing that. We're the grown-ups in this society. And, yeah, it looks cold, and it looks like it's harsh, but it is a sense of justice. We're going to stop the badness without going and smacking that kid around. Because I don't need to do that, number one. I mean, I just don't need to.
Right.
And I don't want to.
It's like a parent giving their child tough love.
Exactly. Preppers are the tough love segment of this society, and we've been muzzled, and our opinions mean nothing, and we're shrugging, and we're like, okay, pretty sure we know how this is going to turn out because we've been on this earth longer, and we're wiser, and we have some moral character, and we know what's going to happen here. Knock yourself out. Just knock yourself out. I guess that's a better way of putting it. You've helped me work through this. Thank you. Do I owe you guys some therapy session money or something like that?
The prepper therapy hour. Oh man. Here's, let's take the total 180 on this for just a few minutes and to kind of wrap things up a little bit. Do you have any hope at all that in any way, shape, or form, and I mean, I don't even know, I have no personal faith that there is any real political solution anymore. I'm very quickly on board with down the rabbit hole with just being a total free association anarchist. But do you have any hope that there will be something to perhaps turn this around?
Great question. Yes and no, because I'm a lawyer and people pay me money by the hour for me to say yes and no and maybe, and it drives them crazy. Yes, I have hope, and no, I don't have hope. The thing that I think turns things around is secession and breakup, hopefully peacefully. That rarely happens, but obviously peacefully would be better. I think, for example, it makes no sense that New York City and some teeny town in Alabama have, in essence, largely due to the federal government and the Supreme Court, the same sets of laws. It makes absolutely no sense. And so I think that republics don't work when they're this big. They never have. And when they get past a certain point, some political scientists think it's about 3 million people, and many think it's like 100,000. So it's much smaller than there. At some point, republics don't work anymore. And we're seeing that. And this is no longer a republic, and it's not working very well. So, yes, if there was a way, especially peacefully, to have Eastern Washington State be its own thing, Seattle be its own thing, and the rest of rural Western Washington be its own thing. I'll speak, locally my thing. So there's 3, quote, states within one current state, for example. I think that would be great because like-minded people could rule themselves as lightly as possible, I might add. And things I think would go better. So yes, that is the hope. As far as the hope of 318 million people in 1/6 the globe or whatever it is, landmass, as one unified country, changing this stuff, absolutely no way. And I do political stuff. I get it. There is no way. If anything, things are becoming more and more divisive. Look at the quickening of the pace of that. Confederate flag being a thing. MTV, by the way, pay attention to this.
Oh God!
MTV,
we're gonna go here.
Oh God! Because I just saw this the other day and it blew. My mind exploded. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's going to be a new reality series that a bunch of young people are going to watch called White People. And in essence, if what I've seen from the trailer and the news stories is true, it's essentially white people like confessing about how awful they are and how white privilege means. I mean, all this horrifically destructive stuff. Horrifically destructive. one of the worst possible things I can think of to happen to the United States would be a race war. And I hate those two words like you don't even know. I mean, it is horrible, horrible stuff. And nonsense like this MTV show are going to help that along. And I hope it doesn't happen and all of that other stuff. There are all kinds of really awesome people of every different color, and they're probably not going to start killing each other just because TV producers want to, sell TV shows. So I have more hope than that, but still it is a destructive thing. So as far as like that's the divisive thing. Things are getting more and more divisive. It always happens as a government is crashing. They always pit groups against each other. I mean, it's classic. I mean, the historical examples, I can't think of a contrary example. A government printed too much money and is going down, and all of a sudden everybody is getting along super well. I really don't see that ever happening. And so, this country as it currently exists, I think is unsustainable and will not last. I don't know when the end date is. So no, there's no hope politically, none whatsoever. You would need the general population to think like the three of us and everybody listening. I'm guessing everybody listening, and that's just never going to happen. I mean, the Dorito guy I was talking about, is he going to say, you know what, I've been leeching off of people. I need to get a job and I need to go and do something charitable to pay back society for the years that they carried me? Are you kidding me? That never happens. And it never happens to 250 million people at the same time. It'll never happen. Yeah. So, no. I mean, politicians, trust me on this one. Politicians they're even lower life forms than you think they are. I know them.
Well, Glenn, I think we're going to stop right there since we all thoroughly riled up and scared the crap out of the listeners. And I'm sure half the listeners are on the internet right now buying more ammo.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what I'm doing. The minute we get off, I'm jumping on my phone.
And I'm going to stop him from doing that. But anyway, Glenn, man, it is awesome as always. Hopefully we can wrangle you into at least one more episode this season. But as always, man, I love having you on the show.
Always, man.
Fantastic. Great questions. You guys are funny, and that makes me step up my game. And it's I got to be funny. And it's good stuff. So, and I feel like I know you guys, even though I've never met you. It's really weird. But anyway, no, it's been fantastic. Love the show. I love the guests you have on. I love, all that stuff. The James Price thing was precious. And so, good stuff. You guys do a nice job.
Awesome.
Thanks, man. A few quick messages before we sign off today. Tune in next week for part 2 of our interview with Glen Tate. We'll be discussing new thoughts on convincing those closest to you to prepare. Don't forget to support the ITRH mission by becoming a member of the Roving Horde Armada. You'll be keeping the show safe and sound. Visit itrh.net today to help us keep the lights on. And as always, links to connect with author Glen Tate, show notes, and links to resources from today's episode can be found at www.intherabbithole.com/E135. Plus, be sure to leave your comments and questions about today's episode there as well. From the Lone Star State, till next time, stay safe and sound.